The story of the Ford Thunderbird began in the late 1940s, when American GIs had returned home and Detroit was struck with the idea of producing the same kind of small, nimble, two-seat sports cars that our servicemen took a liking to while they were overseas. Chevrolet fired the first successful volley in 1953 with the Corvette, and that caught Ford and Chrysler flat-footed. It wasn't until 1955 that Ford returned fire with the Thunderbird, a car that would go on to morph into several different designs and mission statements over the next 4 decades. With all of those changes and all of those differences, this 1955 T-Bird owned by George Watt of Santa Ana, California, possesses enormous significance. This is the very first production Thunderbird ever sold to the public. George was a true T-Bird believer right from day one.
Well, I liked the T-Bird from the first time I saw it. We were out to dinner to a restaurant, and someone drove in with a brand new T-Bird about the first week they were out. And I knew right then that someday I'd have one. They were pretty expensive then, around $3,000. So it was difficult in those days to get a special car.
His landmark 55 was actually the second T-Bird he ever bought, and it wasn't until 10 years after seeing his first Thunderbird that he caught up with this historic black roadster.
Well, I'd had one that I had a Thunderbird back in those days that I bought in 1960, and 1965 we went to a convention of Thunderbirds, and I decided I'd get another one and fix it up, kind of specialize it, customize it. So I started looking for another 55, and when I finally found it, it turned out to be the first one. So I knew that I couldn't customize that, so I bought that with the idea of restoring it and back to its original condition, and that's what I did.
And boy, did it ever need restoration.
Well, when I came across the Thunderbird, it was in a body shop where it had been taken in for some front-end repair, and the owner at that time had failed in his payments. He defaulted on the payments, and the finance company came to the body shop to repossess it. And the body shop owner bought it to save the investment he had in it. And that's where I came into the picture. I was driving by the body shop one day and saw it parked out there out in the outside, and it was in pretty bad shape. But I talked to the man wondering if he wanted to sell it, and he said he would sell it.
George would soon get suspicious about how incredibly rare his project car was.
I wrote to Ford and asked him about this car because of the serial number. I thought it might be one of the early ones. It turns out the serial number is 100,005, and I knew they started numbering at 100,001. So I bought it on the strength of it being one of the first 5, and it turned out that it was the first one.
George is a retired insurance executive, but he's anything but stagnant, since he and his T-Bird have a new joint venture to perform for, who else? Ford.
Well, since I retired, Ford has asked me to be a part of their public relations operation on the West Coast. So I'm as an independent contractor for Ford, I serve as a liaison between the Ford car clubs, meaning the Model A, the Model T, the Torinos, all the various Ford products. But whenever there's need for some of that nostalgic type work, why they ask me to find the car for them. So I work closely with Ford Public Relations in that regard.
From junkyard dog to a piece of 50s Boulevard history, George Watt's classic 55 T-Bird is as coveted a collector car as has ever been built. Now, would George be willing to part with T-Bird numero uno?
I don't have any reason to part with it.
So, I guess the rest of us had better keep our eyes open the next time we're passing by the local body shop.